Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. We're about to unpack a crisis that has the entire global economy teetering on a razor's edge. And hey, if you want to stay ahead of the curve on global security, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. All right, let's get to it. If we burn, you burn with us. Just let that sink in for a moment. That is the absolutely chilling message coming out of Tehran right now. And make no mistake, this isn't just a threat to their enemies in the region. It's a threat to the entire global economy. Which means, yeah, it's aimed at you and me. This goes way beyond simple political posturing. This is a declaration that could literally flip the world on its head.
So, that brings us to the big question, right? Iran is saying that no port in the Middle East is safe anymore. How did we get here? What could possibly have changed to make them issue such a huge threat? And maybe more importantly, just how serious is it? Let's unpack exactly what went down.
You know, a crisis like this doesn't just pop up out of thin air. There's always a spark. In this case, it was a single, massive military operation that finally lit a fuse that's been smoldering for decades. So let's take a look at that spark. And the speed at which this all unraveled is just staggering. I mean, look at this timeline. On February 27th, the diplomatic talks completely collapse. Boom. Just 24 hours later, the very next day, the US and Israel unleash Operation Epic Fury. We're talking a huge military campaign targeting Iran's infrastructure. And Iran's response? It was immediate. They retaliate by threatening to shut down all regional ports and shipping. So you go from a failed negotiation to a global crisis in, 72 hours? It's insane. Okay, so to really grasp the weight of Iran's threat, you have to look at a map. You have to understand the geography. Because this whole thing, this entire conflict, it all pivots on one single tiny spot on the globe. A spot that happens to be one of the most critical and vulnerable locations on the entire planet. And here it is, the Strait of Hormuz. This is the heart of the matter. It might look like just a narrow stretch of water, but honestly, calling it the world's energy artery is no exaggeration at all. The sheer volume of oil and gas that flows through here, it powers everything. We're talking global shipping, the electricity in our homes, the factories that make our stuff. It all depends on this choke point. And the scale we're talking about, it's just mind-boggling. Get this, a full 20%, 1/5 of the entire world's supply of oil and liquefied natural gas has to squeeze through this single, narrow passage. 1/5. So what does that 20% actually look like? Well, to put it into perspective, Iran's blockade means that 20 million barrels of oil per day have just been wiped off the global market, instantly. That kind of supply shock is so massive it sends immediate tremors through the entire global financial system. It's a huge deal. So you're probably wondering, how on earth can Iran enforce a blockade like this against some of the most powerful navies in the world? Well, here's the thing. They're not trying to fight a traditional fair fight. No way. They're using a very specific strategy, something called a saturated asymmetric siege. The idea isn't to go head-to-head, warship to warship. The goal is much simpler. Just overwhelm the enemy. Make the entire waterway an absolute death trap by flooding it with a massive number of cheap, unconventional weapons. And here's what that siege actually looks like. This is their toolkit. We're talking about layers and layers of sea mines. You know, those cheap but incredibly deadly underwater explosives. Then you've got swarms of drones and unmanned surface boats packed with explosives, basically acting like naval suicide bombs. And on top of all that, long-range anti-ship ballistic missiles that can target ships from far away. The whole tactic is called kinetic saturation. It's simple, really. You just fire more things at a ship that its defense systems can possibly shoot down. It proves the old saying, right? Quantity has a quality all its own. So it's pretty clear this is way more than just a regional military scuffle, right? This siege is sending a massive economic shockwave across the entire planet. And yeah, this is the part that hits all of us, right in the wallet. I mean, you can literally watch the economic damage happen in real time. Just look at these numbers. On February 27th, oil is sitting at about $82 a barrel. The day Operation Epic Fury kicks off, it skyrockets to almost $97. A few days later, once Iran confirms the strait is closed, it's over $108. That's a more than 30% price jump in a single week. That's like a crippling tax suddenly being slapped on the entire world economy. But it gets even more complicated, and the impact goes way beyond the price you pay at the pump. This is something people are calling the Fertilizer LNG Paradox, and it's a huge deal. See, the blockade stops all that liquefied natural gas, mostly from Qatar. The problem is that same natural gas is the #1 ingredient needed to make urea fertilizer. So, no gas means no fertilizer. And what happens? Fertilizer prices spike by 35%, which puts global food security at massive risk. A fuel crisis is suddenly and very quickly turning into a food crisis. And as you can imagine, a crisis of this magnitude isn't just about economics. It's shaking up the entire geopolitical map. It's forcing every single country out there to completely rethink its alliances, its trade routes, its entire strategy, really. And if you need proof of that realignment, look no further than this. Don't meddle in our affairs. That's a direct quote, a very blunt warning from China's defense minister. This is a huge signal of Beijing throwing its diplomatic weight behind Iran. And it's a direct challenge to America's influence in the region. China's not sitting on the sidelines anymore. They're making it very clear they're a major player now. So how did the U.S. respond? Well, they doubled down. They announced their own naval blockade targeting Iran's ports. And what that creates is an incredibly dangerous standoff. You now have two major, heavily armed powers locked in a direct economic siege against each other, and the stability of the entire world is just hanging in the balance. Out of all this chaos, there's one major lesson that every country is learning, and it's giving rise to a new global priority: energy sovereignty. The big takeaway is that being dependent on these vulnerable maritime choke points is a critical, potentially fatal weakness. So now, nations are scrambling to develop their own domestic energy, renewables, nuclear, you name it, and to find new, secure trade routes that don't rely on the open sea. Which really leaves us with one final huge question, doesn't it? This whole crisis has ripped the curtain back and shown just how fragile our global energy system really is. So the question is, are we watching the end of the global energy map as we know it? And what comes next? A new world that's more localized, more secure, or maybe, just maybe, a lot more volatile? Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your time. If you found this breakdown valuable, please do us a huge favor and hit that like button, share it with someone who might be interested, and of course, subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network for more. We really want to hear what you think. Is this the end of the line for our current energy system? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and come join the conversation on our social media channels. You can find all the links for those in the description. Thanks again.